I recently graduated from my master's degree in clinical psychology with very good grades and without having to do any resits during my master's or my bachelor's, and while still having a very fulfilling life where I got to spend lots of time with my loved ones, take a whole bunch of dance classes, cook regularly, meditate, do yoga, do all the things that I love. And there were many things during my studies that were really challenging and that I didn't particularly enjoy, like statistics and reading lots of dry theoretical articles or writing my bachelor's and my master's thesis. That stuff was hard, but I managed to do it. And based on the feedback that I received, I managed to do it very well. And I think one of the biggest factors that contributed to this success was that I read this book, Deep Work by Cal Newport, and I applied what I learned from it in my life. And today I want to share those insights with you because I also want you to be able to finish your studies successfully or become an expert in a field that you really care about or master any kind of difficult skill that you've been dreaming of but that you found yourself having some difficulties really getting a grip on. All right, so what did this book teach me? First of all, the concept of deep work and how that stands in contrast to shallow work. So deep work is where you, as the name says, you go into a deep state of concentration and you work on things that are difficult and that really stretch your cognitive capacities to their limit. Like you're doing the most. It's really difficult. And when you engage in this kind of super focused work, you are able to create things that are new, that are hard to replicate, that are hard to copy for anyone else. And you really improve and master a skill. And then you have shallow work, which is where you work in a distracted, unfocused kind of way. And you also work on things that are not too difficult, organizational things, planning a meeting, writing an email. It's a little more like logistical type of activities that you're doing. And with this kind of work, it's usually easy to replicate. Someone else could easily take it over for you. And also, you don't really create any new creative things, any new value in the world. And Cal Newport, the author of this book, he puts forward a hypothesis. He says that deep work is becoming increasingly rare. So, as you know, a lot of us are on social media. We are constantly connected, constantly available to everyone, and that's kind of becoming the norm. So working in a deep way is becoming rare. Working in a pretty shallow, distracted way, that's becoming the norm. But at the same time, working in a deep way is becoming increasingly valuable, because if you want to become an expert at what you do, if you really want to master something, then you need to be able to push yourself to the limit and to really go deep. And so, because it's becoming so rare for people to be able to do that, if you are able to cultivate that skill of going deep, then he says you will be able to thrive and really add meaning to the world. So when I was reading the book, one of the first things that I realized was like, oh yeah, I am also very distracted. I spent a lot of time on Instagram back then or any kind of social media sites. I had trouble concentrating when I was working on my school stuff. I would take out my phone and start scrolling at any small moment of boredom. I was procrastinating a lot. And I didn't really have a clear sense of what value I want to add to the world. So this was one of the first things that he got me thinking about. What is important to me? What do I really care about? What do I want to add to the world? What do I want to become an expert at? And I think this is a great reflection exercise, and I would encourage you to also ask yourself those questions. And don't panic if you don't have all the answers right now, because one, sometimes it takes some time, and two, there are many paths that we all can take. You know, sometimes we now have so much choice that it can feel really overwhelming. And if you're looking for that perfect calling or your purpose, your one and true purpose on this world, you know, that's a very, very difficult question to answer. And I think there are many beautiful paths that you could take that can work out for you. So take some time, reflect on what you're good at, what you enjoy, what you find important, and then choose one thing that you want to become really good at. And it doesn't have to be the perfect thing, but just one thing that you can see yourself doing. And then once you become better and better at that, that in itself is very rewarding. So in my case, that one thing that was very high on my priority list was becoming the best therapist I can be. And once I had identified that, I knew that there were certain steps I had to take and certain skills that I had to attain in order to become an expert at being a therapist. And same for you, whatever you identify, whether it is becoming a really good cook or a really good dancer or an IT expert or whatever it is, there will be certain steps and certain skills that you need to attain in order to get there. So for me, I knew that if I wanted to be a therapist here where I live right now, I needed to first attain my bachelor and then my master and then potentially some more education. But first of all, those steps, and that in turn required me to become really good at reading scientific articles, designing experiments myself, conducting research, writing in an academic way, practicing my therapeutic skills, my communication skills. So essentially a whole bunch of difficult new skills that I had to learn. And if you want to learn a new difficult skill, working in a distracted way where you do a bit of work, you hear your phone buzz, you check it, you come back, you do some more work, you check your email inbox, you reply something here and there, you think of your grocery list, you come back to work, your phone rings, and you have all that back and forth, it's just not gonna get you there. To learn a skill, you need to spend a bunch of time, a whole bunch of time, concentrating deeply on doing just that. And why? Well, there are many reasons, but here are two very important ones. First of all, if you want to learn a new skill, then you need to make those connections, those neuronal pathways in your mind or between your brain and certain body parts. Those connections need to be strengthened. And if you keep switching from one task to another, doing many things at once, multitasking essentially, then imagine your brain or the pathways in between your brain and your body, imagine them being like a sand field, okay? So, and you're trying to get from one side of the sand field to the other side. And if you keep taking many different roads, one time you take this road, one time you take that road, one time you take this one, and so on, then you'll keep having a bunch of roads that are still kind of sandy and not very easy to get through. But if you keep using only one route and use it again and again and again, that route, that connection in your brain will become more sturdy, it will become more hard, it will become more easy for you to get through. So I hope that this metaphor helps you understand that you need to do that one thing again and again instead of spreading your energy to a bunch of different things. And secondly, there's this thing called attention residue. So that's basically where you work on one task and then you switch to another task. And a part of your attention, this is just how our brain works, stays with the first task. So then the attention you have left for doing the second task is not as much. And so you do it at a lesser quality. And if you instead, again, just focus on one thing, then you have as much of your attention available to do that thing very well. The next thing I learned from the book is that deep work is not just good for your productivity, but also for your well-being in general. And right now, there is a very important conversation about how we live in a productivity-driven society where people feel like their worth is determined by how much they can produce. And I absolutely agree that we do need to slow down and realize that our worth is not tied to how much we can produce. But at the same time, I know that when I just lie around at home doing nothing, procrastinating, not having anything to work towards, then I just don't feel my best. Versus when I do have something to work towards, when I'm challenging myself, when I am working on something that matters to me, then I feel better. And there's good reason for that. First of all, your reality is constructed out of what you pay attention to. So if you lie around at home doing nothing, then your reality might start to seem quite empty and pointless. And similarly, if you work in a distracted way where you always respond to people's requests, to people's emails and messages, and you work a little bit here and a little bit there, but you don't ever cultivate a real focus on one thing, then your reality will seem very stressed and frustrated and all over the place, right? And in those cases, if you're lying around at home or if you're working in this busy, distracted way, then your mind has more time, more opportunity to focus on all the things that are going wrong with your life and on trivial things and on problems. Whereas if you develop focus and if you choose one thing to dive deep into, then you will create a reality that has meaning and that feels important. And secondly, our minds, they like a challenge. People tend to overestimate how happy, how fulfilled they will feel when they have completely unstructured free time. And they tend to underestimate how happy they will feel when they are working. And that is actually because at work you have built-in challenges and goals that you're working towards. And sometimes when you're working on such a challenge and such a goal, you can get into a state of flow. So flow is like when you're really into something and you're going at it and you just keep going and you become immersed in it. And this state of flow has actually been linked to a higher life satisfaction. And because deep work can get you into such a state of flow, doing deep work can actually increase how satisfied you are with your life. We think that we are happiest when we're just chillaxing when we've achieved everything and we can just take a break. But actually, some of the best moments in life happen when you choose to stretch your body or your mind or both to its limits in an effort to achieve something that you think is worthwhile and important. Alright, so now you probably have a good idea as to why working deeply is important. But if you now say to yourself, alright, cool, from now on I will work deeply, that won't be enough. As humans, we are constantly bombarded with these desires and distractions, whether it's sleep or food or sex or social media, video games, TV. There are so many things asking for our attention and so many temptations to give into. And if you don't have any strategies, any rituals, any habits in place to help you do deep work, then you'll just give into those moment-to-moment desires at the cost of concentrating and working deeply. Most of the following strategies are from the book, and some I've tweaked or discovered by myself. The first strategy is to work rhythmically. So in the book, he actually presents 4 different kinds of ways or philosophies of working deeply, and you have to figure out which one fits best for you. And if you're intrigued to know all the 4 philosophies, go ahead and read the book. But the one that works best for me is the rhythmic philosophy. And with that philosophy, you basically turn your deep work sessions into a regular habit, into a rhythm, which will help make it easier for you to transition into deep work, because you're not asking yourself, oh, when should I start to work? Maybe I can do it then. Nah, not really feeling it, maybe later. You know, lots of back and forth in your mind. You take that away and you just make it a very clear habit. So for me, that meant, for example, while I was writing my thesis, I had a rhythm of waking up every day around 8, meditating, having breakfast, and then getting to work at 9. 9 was my starting time. And then I would do around 4 sets. 4 sets was my goal every day, with breaks and with lunch in between. And that was the rhythm I had. And another example I can give you was, there was a vacation that I went on where I also had to prepare for a statistics exam. So I said, okay, I'm gonna wake up an hour earlier than everyone every day, and I'll do 50 minutes before everyone gets up and we have breakfast with them, and then after breakfast do 2 more sets of 50 minutes, and the rest of the day I get to enjoy. And I was surprised at, 1, how much I still enjoyed that vacation, and 2, how much of a good grade I got. And these rhythms helped me to stop pushing work ahead and just get into it every day. It's a given. I don't have to discuss it in my head. And then with every day that I did it, it became more of a habit and it became easier to get into it. The next strategy is to ritualize. So there is this idea, especially amongst creatives and artists, that there's this sense of inspiration that you have to wait for and then catch it and then get into your work. So it's kind of dependent on some sort of external factor before you can get to work. But Cal Newport, he actually says that great creative minds think like artists, but work like accountants. So what he means by that is, instead of waiting for this perfect moment, for the perfect time, the perfect place, you create a ritual that makes it easy for you to transition into deep work when you decide, all right, I'm now going to do deep work instead of having to wait for anything else to happen. And to build that ritual that will help you to transition into deep work and that will help you stay in that deep state for a longer time, consider the following questions. Where will you work? It's helpful to have a certain location or certain locations that you do deep work in, because it can help you build that connection that once I'm in this location, it's time to go deep. So for me, at the moment, I just work at a specific desk in my room, but I've also worked in certain libraries or at my boyfriend's place at a specific desk. And the most important thing for me with my choice of place is that it's a place that is quiet. And if it's not quiet, then I'll put in some earphones and listen to some alpha waves or bird sounds or something that is not distracting. If I'd listen to music, I would just be jamming to the music instead of focusing. So just some sort of noise that keeps the other noise out, but that still allows me to focus. So yeah, figure out a location that helps you to focus and that ideally you can keep coming back to in order to really make that connection strong that when I'm here, I'm working deeply. Next question to consider when building your ritual. For how long will you work? Try to give yourself a time limit, because if you don't, then the work can still keep pushing and pushing because, oh, I still have time later. So for me, if my goal is to do 4 sets of deep work, 1 hour each, then I will try to give myself a time limit of 5 hours and 30 minutes in which to complete those sets, which then includes 2 15-minute breaks and 1 long lunch break of an hour. And so I have a fixed set of time in which I need to get those sets done, and I can't keep spreading it forever and ever. Next question. How will you work once you start? You need to make it very clear for yourself what your goal is and what is allowed and what is not allowed during a set of deep work. Because otherwise, again, your mind will go back and forth discussing, oh, maybe I can do a little bit of this or a little bit. No, make it very clear for yourself what you have to do. For me, that is that I don't get any notifications on my phone or on my laptop. I don't check my email inbox. My phone is on silent. I have this sleep mode function, so it only allows calls to get through, which I don't get a lot of calls, so I'm never really disturbed by my phone. I also don't eat or drink while I'm doing a set. In the breaks, yes, snacks are great, but while I'm doing a set, no eating or drinking. I work only on one clearly defined task. So instead of saying, do the YouTube video or write the script of the YouTube video, I'll say, okay, in this set, I will dedicate myself to writing the section on rituals of the next YouTube video I'm trying to bring out. Sometimes it happens that I get really stuck on something, or I do get a sudden burst of inspiration that I just feel I need to work on another section, and then I will allow myself to do that, to switch to a different task. But then I make it clear for myself that, okay, now this is what I'm working on. So to prevent, all the going back and forth, I try to make it very clear what the purpose of this set is. Then I have a rule that if something unrelated pops into my mind, like I have to still do the groceries, or there's a video I want to watch, there's someone I want to text, it happens. Then I have a paper next to me, a blank piece of paper or a note on my laptop where I can quickly write that down so I won't forget it. And then I can take it out of my mind and get back to the task at hand. All right, last question to consider when designing your deep work ritual is, how will you support your work? and what does your brain and your body need in order to stay in this deep work state for as long as possible. So for me, that is one, eating food that will keep me energized, but not too much or too heavy that I'll feel sleepy or drowsy in any way. Two, having a comfortable chair and desk so that I can stay comfortable and not feel like I'm having pain anywhere. Three, keeping my laptop or whatever I'm working with organized so that I can easily find documents and don't waste time on that. And four, in my breaks, doing some stretching or yoga or my favorite, dancing, because again, that keeps me energized. Whereas if I go on Instagram or YouTube or do some web surfing in the breaks, then I notice I just get distracted and lose my concentration. So here you have an example of how I built my deep work ritual and what I pay attention to. But make sure that you explore what works for you. Even for me, I'm pretty sure it's going to change as I move into different stages of my life. This is what has worked for me as a student, but maybe as I take on a new job or have kids or whatever, it will surely have to adjust. So make sure that you explore and find what works for you. Next strategy is to plan ahead. I always take some time every Sunday to plan out the next week. Okay, what are my priorities this week? When will I make time to see my friends, my loved ones? What do I want to achieve this week? When can I go to dance classes? All these questions. And I also take time at the end of every day to plan out the next day. So, for example, here you can see a little plan that I made for today. And I really notice the difference that it makes when I don't make a plan before and I just kind of let the day unfold. Sometimes that can be necessary and beautiful in its own way, but for the most part, if I just let the day unfold, I have no plan whatsoever, then I will just keep doing what's easiest in the moment, which is snoozing my alarm many, many times, extending my breakfast, watching YouTube videos, doing just one more thing before I get to work, and then one other thing. And at the end of the day, I've just procrastinated. I've not been working. I've also not really enjoyed my free time, and I just feel like a mess. When I instead make a clear plan beforehand, I know when to wake up, I know what to do once I've woken up, I have clear times that I can stick to, and I end up working towards my goals and feeling a lot more satisfied with that day. And it's important to, when you're making the plan, make it realistic. As humans, we tend to underestimate how much time we need. In my experience, everything takes so much longer than I think it will. So plan in some extra time, because if you don't do that and you're too ambitious with your plan, then you can easily feel like you're not even able to keep up, you feel overwhelmed, you just ditch the whole plan, give up on everything. So make sure you make it realistic so that you can actually keep up with it and feel like you're doing a good job. And this whole planning thing, especially if you're a creative person, if you're an artist, it can feel rigid, it can feel constraining. But Cal Newport makes a very important point that I would like you to consider, which is it's not about constraining you or having to perfectly stick to the plan. If something else does come up, if an idea and inspiration does come up, you can adjust and go with that. It's about consciously evaluating how you're spending your time and really getting to have a say in how you want to spend it. Being purposeful, intentional, respecting your own time, instead of just being controlled by all these desires and distractions, you are like, okay, here I am. How do I want to spend my time? How do I want to go forward? It's about being intentional. The next strategy is to keep score of how much deep work you've been doing. So let's see if I can get this in focus. Yes. So here's the current week, for example. And as you can see here, I always have these little boxes every day, and I fill them in whenever I've done 1 hour of deep work is one box. And it's such a little but very satisfying thing to do, because it's like I'm collecting evidence of what I'm capable of, and then seeing that I've done the sets is very motivating and keeps me going and helps me keep track of my progress. The next strategy is to work with a partner. I often work together with my boyfriend. So what we do is the day before, we already plan when we're going to wake up, what time we're going to start to work. And then the next day, wake up, I meditate, he does something else, we have breakfast, and then we get to work, and we motivate each other to be sharp with that, to really get to work. And then sometimes we work in the same room, sometimes in different rooms. Whatever the case, we both go into our focus mode and don't talk to each other. When the hour is over, we come back, and then we have a little break together, maybe discuss what we did, what was difficult, what we're struggling with, and maybe our goals for the next set. And then once the break is over, we motivate each other to get back to work. We do the next set, and on until we've reached the goal that we had set for that day, which is usually also around 4 hours. And also when we're not working together, we often still tell each other about how many sets we were able to do that day. And by doing so, I think we kind of wake each other's ambition. It's kind of motivating to know that you'll be able to share your successes with someone that cares about you and that you care about, or to be held accountable by them if you did less than what you know you're capable of. And sometimes when he tells me like, yeah, I did 4 sets today, I'm like, "Ah, I want that too. If maybe I wasn't that productive that day, but it's like in a healthy and loving way, kind of just a motivation. Like, ooh, I see you working for yourself, and you're doing so well, and I know I'm capable of that too, and I also want that for myself. So you kind of just push each other to get the most out of yourself. And with one of my closest friends, shout out to you, Natasha, I also developed a method where we basically do the same thing that I do with my boyfriend, but then via WhatsApp. So often during Corona, actually, we would just text each other the day before, hey, do you want to do the method tomorrow? And then the method consists of us waking up, texting each other, and then basically starting a set together via text, and then checking in with each other every hour or after every set, how it went, what our goals are, and so on and so forth. And so you basically have someone doing it with you, and that can really motivate you and keep you on track as well. But with this method, be careful not to get distracted with all the other shiny things that are happening on your phone when you're using your phone to text your friend. When you work with a partner, consider 2 things. Firstly, it helps if they are familiar with deep work. So either have them read the book or recommend this video to them. And secondly, be wise in who you choose as a partner. Is this person ambitious, energetic, dedicated? Do they keep their word? If you have a feeling that they are not those things, then working with them could actually slow down your process. So just be wise with making that decision. The next strategy is to focus on the wildly important. So, what that means is you only have so many hours in one day. And the more you try to cram in, the less you actually accomplish on each of those things. So instead, set priorities, focus on a couple wildly important things that you want to do. Like when I was working on my thesis, well, I did drag it out for some time, and then at some point I was like, okay, I just want to get this over with. So let me make this my number one priority for the time being. And after that, I can do whatever I want. So I made it my priority and I tried to channel all of my energy into that. And that did eventually help me to get it done once and for all. The next strategy, which is one of my absolute favorite, is to be lazy at the right point in time. So in order to work properly, you also need to rest properly. So ideally, decide on a time that you want to be done, where your workday stops and your free time, your resting time begins. For me, that's usually around 5. For the author of this book, who is a professor, an author, a father of 3 children, very busy man, his time is 5:30, so maybe earlier than you might think. And he never, or hardly ever, works past 5:30 despite all his responsibilities. And he says that it's so important that when you work, you really work, but once you're done with work, you completely shut down all the thinking, all the issues related to work. So you stop checking your email again and again after dinner. You stop, trying to figure out how to fix this issue at work when you're also with your family or your friends and actually supposed to be relaxing. Once you're done with work, really be done with it. If there are more things you have to take care of that day, it can happen. It's okay. Then, expand your working day. But once you're done, be done. Why is this so important? First reason he mentions is that downtime or resting time helps you to gain insights. So I often notice that when I'm on my 4th set and I'm trying to figure something out, nothing seems to make sense. And I'm like, ugh, I just can't figure this out. This is horrible. And then I stop and I rest and I get some good sleep and I wake up the next day and all of a sudden I can just figure it out and everything seems so clear to me. And this is because when you're working on a problem that's like a math problem where you really need to apply strict rules, then your conscious mind is most suited to figure that out. Okay, cool. But when you are working with something that, making a decision or working on a problem that has a lot of factors that go into it and many possible ways of solving it or phrasing it, or drawing it or whatever, then your unconscious mind is actually better at figuring that out, because while you're resting and not even working on that problem, it is still making connections between things and actually finding solutions for you without you having to invest any conscious effort anymore. The next reason that resting is so important is that when you're working on something in a concentrated way, you need what is called directed attention. And directed attention, you can run out of it. It's finite. You don't have endless directed attention. So when you shut down for the day and then you do other things that don't require that concentrated, directed attention, you cook, you talk to friends, you dance, you do whatever you like, then your body and mind has a chance to replenish that attention. But if you keep interrupting your resting time with checking your email and working a little bit here and a little bit there and just fixing this one more thing and scheduling this one more meeting, then you never really give yourself the chance to fully restore that attention and work at your full capacity the next day. And last reason why resting is a good idea is because the work that you do in those evening hours is usually not that high of a quality, because he says that people who are just starting out with this deep work thing can usually do 1 hour of high quality deep work. If you're not used to it, that's usually your max. Experts at deep work can do around 4 hours of really, really deep work. So keeping that in mind, if you plan your day well, you should hit that max of 4 hours somewhere in the afternoon. Unless you have a completely different rhythm and you always start working in the afternoon, okay, then it might stretch into the evening. But for most people, you'll hit that maximum capacity somewhere during your working day. So any work that you do after that will decrease in quality. So you might as well miss out on that and start the next day with your full concentration again. I really noticed that with every set I do, more and more distracting thoughts come in, and I'm less and less able to work well. So I know for myself that once I'm exhausted and it's evening, okay, I might as well just give my body the rest that it needs and get back to it tomorrow. And to help you with this transition from your workday to your free time, to your rest, he advises to have a shutdown ritual. So the shutdown ritual will also vary from person to person, but for most people, it will include something like checking your email inbox one last time to really make sure, is there anything important that I really need to respond to go over your agenda the next couple of days and weeks to check if there are any meetings, any deadlines that you need to be working on, to go through your to-do list one last time. And then once you've checked all that and you've made sure that you're on top of things, you know what's coming up, then you make a plan for the next day. What's important tomorrow? What do I want to get to? When will I wake up? When will I start to work? Etc. And then lastly, you say a phrase that will signal to your body, to your mind, that your working day is now really complete. So Cal Newport, he uses the phrase shutdown complete, and he says that to himself to really make his body know, okay, it's safe for me to put this aside and to go into resting mode. And this shutdown ritual, it might cost you an extra 10-15 minutes at the end of your working day, but it's really worth it because, again, it helps your mind know, all right, I can let this stuff go and I can now really relax. So in essence, when you work hard. When you're done, be done. Next strategy, embrace boredom. The skill of concentrating is not like a switch that you can just turn on and off at your own will. So you live your life in a completely distracted way and then you're like, oh, it's time to concentrate. Okay, let's go. It's not gonna work. Your mind is gonna continue to be in the distracted mode because that's what you've trained it to do. So if in every moment of potential boredom, you're waiting for a friend, you're in line at the supermarket, you're on the metro, if in all of those moments you do what most people do nowadays, which is to check your phone, to scroll, to be entertained in some way, then you're teaching your brain that it wants something to do, it will get something to do. It wants to be distracted, it will get the distraction. And you're not teaching it to resist that desire for distraction. And once you then sit down to work, your mind will be in a state where it's constantly drifting off into unrelated thoughts and coming up with better things to do, and you won't have built up the inner strength to resist that temptation and then just go with that. So to succeed with deep work, you need to rewire your brain to be comfortable resisting those distracting stimuli. Stimuli. How do you do that? First of all, in those little moments on the metro, waiting for a friend at a restaurant, waiting in line at the supermarket, consciously, actively decide, no, I'm going to leave my phone exactly where it is, and I'm going to use this as a little gym session for my concentration, or as a little meditation. This will not only help you concentrate, but it will also calm you down in your everyday life when you take those moments to focus on your breath, to focus on your senses. What am I seeing? What am I hearing? To take in your surroundings. Take it as a little meditation. And two, you can still engage in distracting behaviors. You don't have to quit Instagram or YouTube or any kind of entertainment forever. You can engage in it, but do so at your own will instead of blindly following it in any moment of potential boredom. So that means make focus your basis and schedule times when you will purposefully engage in distraction. And until you arrive at that scheduled time of distraction, you do not engage in the distracting behavior. And anytime the desire pops up to hop on Instagram, to watch a YouTube video, to text somebody, and you refrain from doing that, is like a rep in the gym. It's like an exercise for your mental concentration muscle to concentrate. You're training yourself, okay, this desire is there, but I don't have to give into it. I'm gonna come back to what I'm doing. So I, for example, when it comes to Instagram, I use it once a day now. So I first do all the deep work that I want to do that day. And once I'm finished with that, then I go on Instagram I download the app, I go there for a limited amount of time, I do everything I want to do. I watch funny videos, let myself be entertained, gather some new recipe inspirations, watch dance videos, make a post, whatever I want to do, I do it in that time frame. And then I log out, I delete the app, and until the next day, I just let it be and I go back to living in a focused way. Speaking of Instagram, speaking of social media, this is another strategy that Cal Newport highlights, is to quit social media, or I would say at least use it more intentionally. He says that using social media can be particularly damaging to your goal of working more deeply because the fast-paced, cute, juicy, sexy, colorful, dramatic, gossipy content that is prioritized on social media, and the likes, the comments, the messages, all the content that is specifically personalized to your interests and your likes, it triggers a part of your brain that is responsible for the feeling of reward, and it triggers the release of dopamine. Dopamine is the feel-good chemical that gives you the same kind of high that you would get from eating tasty food, having sex, gambling, taking drugs. And once your brain experiences these rushes of dopamine, these highs that you get when you use social media, it becomes harder and harder to resist. And it's not your fault. It's they are designed to be that way. You know, the more time you spend on there, the more advertisements can be shown to you, the more money can be made off of you. So of course, the people who are designing these apps, they have the best psychologists up in their headquarters to help them design these apps in a way that will keep you stuck. And although it's not your fault, once you know this, you can take responsibility and recognize that by overusing social media, again, you're training your brain to always get what it wants in the immediate moment. And by doing that, you're just making it harder and harder for yourself to engage in any acts of concentration, which requires you to delay the gratification of your immediate desires. Social media is so normalized nowadays, and you might fear that you might miss out if you decide to quit it or take a break. And I get that. However, I think it's only fair to yourself if you give yourself the chance to know if this is really for you, and to choose it, to make an informed decision that yes, I want to use this, instead of it just being the default and you just going with it because it's what everyone does. So Cal Newport, he advises to do a 30-day challenge without social media. And I could speak more on social media at this point, but I've made a whole other video on my experience without social media. I did his 30-day challenge, and I ended up making that a whole year challenge because I enjoyed my time without social media so much. And then that year turned into 2 years because I was still living my best life. But if you're intrigued to know more about my experience without social media and what benefits it can have, then check out my other video. I am back on Instagram at this point in time. I don't know if I'll stay there forever, but for now, I'm trying it out again, but I'm using it in a much more intentional and, I find, healthy way. Just less time in general, using it during a specific time frame, only once a day, never using it the hour after waking up or the hour before going to sleep, and on and on. But all of that to say that if you want to get serious about doing deep work, about training your concentration, then it's worth looking at how you're using social media. If you can imagine taking a break from it, quitting it, or at least just changing the way you interact with it to make it a more balanced and healthy habit. Another trick that I got from the book, which can help you with not defaulting back to scrolling on social media in your free time, is that you look for high quality alternatives. So that's like other activities that you would like to do in your free time that give you a more fulfilled feeling than scrolling on social media. If scrolling on social media or any other internet website, platform, whatever, is something that you genuinely enjoy doing, then of course feel free to do that in your free time. But I know for myself that it's not one of my favorite activities. Actually, there are other things like meditating, dancing, cooking, taking a walk, doing sports that I enjoy a lot more. So find some alternatives for yourself and then plan those in. And again, I understand if you might feel some resistance to scheduling your free time, because is it even free time anymore if you've got it all planned out? But I've not found this to be the case. I actually feel a lot more refreshed and relaxed, and especially fulfilled and calm when I've spent the afternoon or the evening doing something meaningful rather than like bathing in scrolling and scrolling and scrolling for hours and feeling like I've not really gotten anything out of it. So those were my most important takeaways from the book, and there are some additional personal notes that I would like to share with you. First of all, doing deep work, learning to concentrate, it is hard. It's so freaking hard. And there have been so many days where I planned out the next day and I'm like, oh yes, tomorrow I'll get to it. And it all sounds so squeaky clean, so promising. And then the next day comes and I sit at my desk and it's time to do the work. And I'm like, oh, there are like a billion things I would rather do than sit at this desk right now and do the work. And just my whole body just feels full of resistance and like I don't want to do it. And what usually helps me in those moments is that I remind myself that actually I don't have to do this. I want to do this. I'm choosing to do this. For example, my thesis. The resistance, I'm telling you, the resistance I felt so many times when I sat down to work, but I reminded myself, okay, I want to be able to be a therapist later. I want to be able to help people. So therefore, I am choosing to write this thesis to get my master and to be able to take those steps. And reminding yourself that you have a choice can get you to work from a place of freedom and more gratitude. That's even the next step, like feeling grateful that you get to educate yourself, that you get to work. But I know it can be difficult to take on that mindset, but at least realizing, okay, I'm choosing to do this. That can help. But even then, the resistance, the dread, it's a normal part of the process. Don't let that make you feel like you shouldn't be doing this or it's a sign that something with the work or something with you is wrong. It could be, it could be that you're genuinely doing something that doesn't even fit to your greater goals or whatever. That's a possibility. But I'm telling you, even if you are doing exactly the thing that fits to you and your purpose, there will still be that resistance. And it's going to be hard, but that's a normal part of the process, honey. And when you then do the work, despite it being hard, you prove to yourself that you're capable of doing hard things in the face of difficult emotions, that you are the one who remains in the driver's seat. It's like, okay, hello, Mrs. Resistance. Hello, Mr. Dread. Hello, you little complaining voice. You can take a seat over here, but I'm gonna continue doing this work. And you can be here, but I won't entertain you, okay? I'll just get on with it. Next thing that I would advise you is to focus on doing one thing at a time. When I thought about writing an entire thesis or the hundreds of hours I would still need to invest to finish it, I just felt overwhelmed. I felt like I couldn't do it. But when I just focused on doing one deep work set at a time on one tiny aspect of the thesis, it made it seem manageable. And eventually, by doing that again and again and again and again, I was able to finish it. Similarly, I would advise you to focus less on the quantity of hours of deep work that you're able to do in one day and more on how consistently you're doing them. Because again, if you plan, okay, I'm gonna do 4 hours of deep work today, right? If you don't even have any practice with this, and then you feel overwhelmed, then you might just push it all to the next day and it will become this big monster of a work that just feels unapproachable. Whereas if you do just one set, okay, and even one set can feel overwhelming at times. So if you even feel resistance to one set, start with 10 minutes. Make it even too easy for yourself. Make it very, very small. Start very small. One sentence, reading one paragraph, doing 10 minutes, okay? But once you've you've done something. You start to feel more capable. You start to feel more in control. And as you keep doing that again and again and again, you build a habit and you make it easier for yourself to transition into it. And also, don't underestimate how much you can achieve if you do 1 hour or 2 hours every day. Like, there was a period in the summer when I was doing the statistical analysis of my thesis. Ugh, horrible. But I did only 1 or 2 sets every day. But I did that consistently, and it got me there. And also, sometimes if you've started with one sentence, if you started with 10 minutes, if you started with one set, whatever small goal you set for yourself, then sometimes you suddenly get into a flow and you're like, oh, okay, I can do more. I guess I can continue now that I'm already here. So start small and keep it consistent. All right, next tip. I always find it hard to do things if I don't see the purpose in them. And sometimes in university, things can seem so dry and unrelated to what you actually want to do in practice later on that it can be hard to find that purpose and that motivation. And when I felt like that, I created my own purpose by continuing to do deep work regardless of whether I thought that the content of what I was studying actually had a purpose. I tried to just focus on, okay, I'm doing deep work and taking this as a gym session for my concentration muscles. Because even though I'm not super passionate about the content that I'm taking in right now, it will still help me to train those concentration muscles, and that will help me later on to do whatever I'm really passionate about in even more depth and with even more quality. Next tip is that sleeping well, sleeping early, and sleeping enough is so key for me to be able to do deep work the next day, and also just for my well-being in general. One thing that has been really helpful for me is viewing deep work not as a chore or a punishment, but instead as something that I do to take care of myself. So I think it's actually a way of being kind to myself if I allow myself to explore my full potential, to see what am I actually capable of, to make my own dreams come true, to keep my own promises, and to show myself that I can trust myself. Also, I discovered a spiritual layer in deep work. It connects to what I've actually been learning from spiritual teachers and from doing meditation, which is whatever you do, do it fully with your full attention, really being present. And so for me, work is just one of the many things that I try to do deeply. How I dance, how I cook, how I make love, how I listen to someone, all of that, I try to do it in a deep and present way. And that makes the experience so much richer and more fulfilling. And I also want you to know that I am by no means perfect at this, for real. There are many days where I forget to plan ahead, where I do give in to the resistance, where I procrastinate, where I don't do a single set of deep work. It happens. And I think it's so important that when that does happen, you don't sink into this spiral of shame and feeling guilty, but instead you try to look at, okay, what happened? Where might it have gone wrong? What can I do to change that next time? And most importantly, what can I do now? At every moment, you have the opportunity to restart and to look at the time you have left and to make a wise decision about how, from now on, now that you're aware of what's happening, how you want to go further. I want to add one very important last side note, which is that the fact that I was able to complete my studies so well also had to do with factors that I had no control over. For example, I grew up with parents who are both doctors, who went to university themselves, who conducted research themselves, who often discussed different political and social issues with us at home, who encouraged us to reflect and think critically, who sent us to a private school where we, me and my sister, already learned how to think and write in an academic fashion, which then made it easier for me to transition into the kind of writing and speaking and thinking that is expected from you at university. Also, I was financially supported by my parents throughout the entire course of my study, and I did decide to work part-time jobs as a waitress and as a dancer for certain periods, but that was a choice I made and not a necessity. So that gave me the freedom to fully focus on my study and not have to worry about how I will pay the bills. And these things played a big role in me being able to finish my studies. And I know that if you are someone who didn't grow up in an environment like this or who didn't have the same support system, that it can be a lot more challenging. And I hope that if you are that person who is the first one in your family to go to university, for example, or who has to balance so many responsibilities at once to make ends meet, that the strategies that I presented in this video can help you to push through these challenges and to make the most out of your time and to make your dreams come true. And with that, I would like to conclude this video. If you found the video helpful, please share it with the people around you, especially with the people that you care about. Leave me a comment to let me know what you thought and what you felt while watching the video. And lastly, if you would like to see more videos where I share the things that have helped me live a more calm and loving and joyful life, then subscribe to this channel and stay tuned.